Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the third in the series of In Conversation With, another one of our online informal colloquial chats with members of Maghull Wind Orchestra. Tonight, I'm joined by Bill Casey, one of our long-serving members. Bill's played alto sax with the band. Well, he can tell you how he joined and sort of his history and background in the band. For almost as long as I've been in the band, I've been involved with Maghull Wind Orchestra for just over 30 years now, and man and boy. So we've sort of seen the band change, and we thought it'd be nice to have a chat between ourselves about the way that the band has progressed and where it sort of first began, where it was up to when we joined, and how we've seen that move forward in the future, and maybe finish off with a few thoughts about the future. And tonight's say is very poignant, as we found out the sad news that our founding member and first conductor of Maghull Wind Orchestra has unfortunately passed away. So our thoughts and feelings are with Eddie's family at the moment. We offer them every sympathy. The committee are already talking about a memorial concert and ways in which we can remember Eddie. But on a personal note, I think I'd just like to say that he gave me all my conducting opportunities and supported me in every step of my way to the path of the career I'm on now. So, you know, we all owe Eddie a great debt of gratitude, and I've agreed with Bill that we'll dedicate tonight's In Conversation to Eddie Rimmer, and you'll hear us talk about him because he's such a huge part of what Maghull Wind Orchestra has become from when it started in 1978. So I'll talk a little bit more about the history of the band for those of you who don't know it later on. But for now, let's welcome Bill Casey. And Bill, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your musical background for the band, how you found out about joined it, and what did it look as you joined and when you got there.
My involvement with the band started I moved to the area. I grew up in this area, went away for work, and I moved to this area in 1993 to an explosives factory over at Wigan. And then one lunchtime, everybody said, "Are you coming to Peter Lammiman's leaving presentation?" I said, "Who's Peter Lammiman? I've never heard of him." He said, "Oh no, he's been off for a year doing some music thing, but he's taking early retirement, and today's the day." So I, never turned down a free lunch, so went to this room, met this guy, Pete Lammiman. I said, "Oh, great, nice to meet you, export sales of explosives, good man, don't know who's going to do that, And I said, "What are you going to do then with your life, Peter?" And he said, "I'm going to teach clarinet and saxophone." And
Really?
now I was by then I'd had a saxophone for maybe 3 years. That's a story in itself. But I taught myself, and I could get almost all the notes out of it. I said, "Oh, that's a shame, Peter. Shame you don't live in Ormskirk, because I could really do with the teacher." Peter says, "I live in Orton." So I started having lessons with Pete Lammiman. My lesson was sometimes before this young lad Phil Shotton that he was teaching, and sometimes after.
Yeah, I was just going to say that would be the time that I was having clarinet lessons with Pete, because Pete actually wrote a thesis about my family and the musical background of the family, and as a thank you, offered to tutor me in clarinet. That's how I ended up having clarinet lessons with Pete. I think I was already playing in the band at that point, because
I think you were, yeah. Because Pete said,
8, yeah.
Why do you come after a few lessons? So why don't you come down to this little band I play in Maghull Town Band? I said, they're okay, nice, friendly people. We have a stop and have a drink in the middle at the bar and things. And he actually did. I remember him saying, "You'll be sat next to this, cantankerous old devil, Brian, but he's not so bad." And that was Brian Ellis. I actually Brian became a very good friend. I didn't find him cantankerous at all. I was just saying to Phil before we started, the only tank bit I found out about him at his funeral was he drove one of those Sherman tanks that they put a canvas skirt around for the D-Day landings to make them float to get them ashore. And yeah, Brian drove a tank at D-Day. But
it's
it was great, isn't it?
It's amazing. A band like ours, and we've mentioned this before, that it brings together people from all over the community, from all walks of life, all sort of aspects and backgrounds, and people you just wouldn't expect to meet, and with stories you perhaps wouldn't expect here. And I know when I joined the band as a child, 8 years old,
what
I was
age were you?
amazed to be allowed. I was 8 when I joined the band, so I would have been about 10 by the time you came along and started as well.
I think it was about 93 or 94 I came along. Yeah.
I was just so thrilled to be involved in a band with adults, and to think that I could be allowed to play with these adult musicians and make music together. And always running through the band, I think, has been this idea of encouraging other people to play, but either by their members bringing people like Pete suggested to you to come and sit next to Brian, and he'll look after you, make sure you're doing. I was invited in and just sit in and get on and do it. And I think from a very early age, I noticed that this seems to be a very, very good educational principle, very sound educational principle, where if you're given the opportunity, you can actually progress so much quicker in an ensemble and involved in music in this way, sitting next to people who already can. And I mustn't miss out on this opportunity to tell my Brian Ellis story. Roll on a few years and I'd discovered tenor saxophone. And I was sitting next to Brian, who was playing alto, and I guess you must have been down the sax section somewhere. Yeah. We were playing St. Thomas's Church Garden Party, which was one of my favourite of the early gigs, and we'll talk more about the early gigs later on. And I remember being amazed by a couple of things at this garden party. One, how spongy the grass was, because it was like moss. It was like a carpet of moss. And to a 10-year-old child, watching the entire slowly sink into the ground on the chairs and get lower and lower, I found incredibly amusing. I was paying attention to the music, honest. And then the other thing was Brian had these badly fitting false teeth, which is why he'd moved from cornet.
That's why he played the saxophone.
Sax. Yeah, that's right. So he'd made this change onto alto sax, but his bad fitting false teeth used to move around in his embouchure as he played. So he had the widest, most ferocious vibrato you've heard, And these teeth would be moving around. He'd play away. We started a garden party, and we finished the piece. He takes the sax out of his mouth, and his top set of teeth stay on the mouthpiece, sort of swinging like a horseshoe, and this 10-year-old child next to him sort of go, "Oh my goodness, look at that." They fall off the mouthpiece, picks them up, picks the grass off, sticks them back in, and we carry on. And I'll never forget that as one of my formative.
I saw that happen on another occasion,
Yeah. Quite incredible, and what a character, and so encouraging of everybody around him.
Absolutely. I mean, the other person that I remember as being encouraging to me, of course, was I was just sat in awe of this kid. You, Phil, you were soloing in the alto section in those days, and also your dad was there, and actually he was infuriated with me that I couldn't play off the beat. If you're watching, Greg, I still can't play off the beat, but I'm trying desperately hard. And I particularly remember Haskell, Rose Queen. He really did say, "Look, you've got to find something else to do for that first bit of the beat, so you don't play on it."
It's all these inside tricks that other musicians give you, isn't it, as you're sitting next to them and you're playing along with them. And it happens all over the place. I remember watching an interview with Miles Davis, and he said he was playing in a trumpet section alongside Dizzy Gillespie, you know, and some other sort of trumpet gods, and Miles Davis is playing fourth trumpet, and they're going, "Hey kid, don't do that. Try that." You know, and I got that sort of information from a lot of the players in the band as well. You know, try it like this, do that. Have you thought about doing that? Count this like that, and I'm so pleased that sort of still happens within our ensemble. And I think it's really from that point of growing up like that that's given me this educational principle to community banding, and the fact that our band should be like an educational experience, or almost like a lesson. You know, rehearsal I tend to treat a bit more like a lesson, really. You know, it's a similar sort of structure, I guess.
Well, Eddie, obviously, we talked about Eddie, obviously saw that talent in you. It was a great one for encouraging young people. He wanted young people in the band. He wanted a learning, improving, training band, and he certainly, you know, spotted youthful talent and made space for it. Encouraged people to come and play, like you do, Phil. He found little bits of solos that young players could play as part of the ensemble. But there was also that atmosphere of, as you've described, everybody who could play, encouraging along those that were learning and developing.
That's right, and we've always had a lot of young musicians involved in the band, some of whom stay and continue with us, go to university and come back. And it's always sort of part of the culture of the band, I suppose. And now we look at our wind orchestra of over 100 members. I mean, that's grown incredibly in the 20 years I've been conducting. I'm at 11 members, including myself. But we also, the band also had quite a heyday with Eddie, and was quite a large and successful ensemble. We all know how the orchestra looks to our members now. I wonder if you could describe how the band looked back in the day when we first joined, and what sort of music we were playing, what sort of gigs we were playing, and where what we've got now has grown. So what do you remember of that? Because I've really fond memories of it, but I wonder what you remember of it.
I remember it as really what your typical small military style concert style band, as I now realise. This was my first exposure to this kind of music, but I recognise what it was. I mean, the origins, as everybody will know, were a British Legion band. Some people got together, and it was only when line dancing came along and the British Legion Club at the Red Line Bridge could make more money renting the place out to line dancing than letting us play. Before my time, letting us play for nothing. So Bob Faith, no longer with us, you know, euphonium player. I think Bob was a town councillor at the time, and he persuaded Maghull Town Council that they needed a town band. So we were instantly a town band and got in the room that we still use today.
That's right. I remember the title of the band being changed then to quite a mouthful of Maghull Town Royal British Legion Band, because we wanted to keep the connection with the Royal British Legion, because at the time there was a very big, strong movement for Royal British Legion bands all across the country, wasn't there? And I know you were quite involved.
There was, yeah. That's absolutely right. Yeah, I mean, somebody had a vision and employed this former director of the Royal Marines band, Ted Wheeling, and gave him the remit to build up British Legion bands around the country, and he was, you know, an amazingly skilled, competent musician, conductor, impresario, front of house guy. I'm quite confident he would come to an MWO concert and look at you, Phil, and what we do and say, I recognise some of that, because I tell you, I recognise a lot of the good things that Ted Wheeling espoused have translated into how we're successful at Maghull.
So absolutely. Andy was a saxophone player, wasn't he?
He was a saxophone player, and he was pretty good. I think he didn't he learn with Johnny Dankworth at the?
I think he did. Yes, I think he did.
Royal School of Music. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, that's right.
So he used to organise. I mean, these once a year a mass bands weekend, and how excited we were at the thought that there might be nearly 100 players in the room together at the end of the weekend.
Yeah, isn't that incredible? Look where we are now.
We do that at every concert now. But the music was, you know, typically military band arrangements, marches of different ilks and kinds, but they were always a bit the same, a lively bit, a gently bit in the middle, and then a reprise of the lively bit. And the music was begged or borrowed, and there were bits of funny copies. Some of them were a bit of a mess because Eddie kept some of the library at his own house because it was so huge. Plus, you're always looking through and going what to play next. And he had it in a shed at the back of his house. And I don't know if anybody from Maghull remembers the canal burst, and the canal behind Eddie's house was actually up on an embankment. So when the canal burst, I mean, that bit of Maghull near the Methodist church, it flooded to several feet deep. And Eddie looked out of his window one morning to see, you know, a significant part of the band's library floating around in his garden that had become a sea.
Yeah, I think that's what happened to The Sound of Music. Some of the copies still bear the scars of that.
It's lost its corner on one of the pieces. Nobody's got that bottom corner.
No, it's floating down the Leeds to Liverpool canals somewhere. But Eddie was such a visionary, really. I think he was ex-army himself, wasn't he?
He was
a band boy in the army, and then when he'd come out of the forces, I guess really the band had taken on the form a community TA band type thing, sort of a territorial army military concert band. And played that, like you say, played that style of music. I remember growing up playing lots and lots of art, and I think the most exciting kind of the most modern thing we might play was sort of Italian festival things like that, and the selection, a few show selections.
Amparita Roca, yeah, that was
absolute belter. My favourite of all my favourite Spanish marches.
I could play that, so I like that.
And of course, you know, the Christmas repertoire and things that never changed from one year to another and what have you. And,
we're still playing those.
Yeah, we still play it now. Yeah, but there was some good repertoire around then, but maybe not as engaging for younger musicians as perhaps I found, actually. Although I quite enjoyed it. But
there was more music from the shows, arrangement from the shows, and that kind of era. The musicals of the 20s, 30s, and 40s. Not much film stuff in those days.
No, of course, it was the music that was written for wind band those days. There wasn't a great deal of repertoire actually specifically written for wind band. You know, obviously, things like the folk song Sweep from Holst and what have you, and some of the Percy Grainger. Not we played any of that at that time. But the idea of writing exclusively for wind band came much later. Everything else would be arrangements for wind band of orchestral works or then actually military band style works rather than sort of the current kind of repertoire that's bespoke for wind bands. So there was a definite shift in when I took over the stick. But before we get to there, I'm just thinking about the kind of concerts we used to do. We used to do a lot of outdoor fetes and festivals.
A lot of fetes. We weren't a marching band. I remember that was enshrined in the minutes from the committee that we will not be a marching band. There'd been some vote before I joined that this would be the case. That actually got a bit blurred when people started coming and waving money in front of us because they were so desperate to get a marching band. So there was one fete in Southport asked us once, and that was the famous kicking the trombone slide along the street from our great friend, again,
Oh,
not
Dave,
with us,
yeah, that
but
wasn't
Dave
that
Denman.
long ago, actually. Yeah.
And the other one was Bickerstaff Maypole, Bickerstaff Treat Day. You know, the Ormskirk band had folded, and they were desperate for a band to play live music, to just for the primary school children dancing around the Maypole, and they were good payers for that, which was great for our funds.
I remember in the March, the very first time we did it as a band, and I remember Eddie lining everybody up on the road, and you know, many people in the band currently remember, because it wasn't so long ago that we ceased to do that. But you know, he lined everybody up, and he said, in his own way, you know, cigarette hand, he said, "Don't worry, it's not so much a march, more of a shuffle." You know? And we shuffled down the road all out of rank and file. You know, it wasn't so hot. But as a child, I remember the rehearsals quite incredibly, because it was like a whole new world to me. It was going along. It was quite late on a school night to be out playing, and the fact that I was out playing, I already felt like a professional musician. So that sort of buoyed me. Everybody got a pint in the interval. I didn't, obviously, but you know, that was sort of, I was around that. In those days, everybody was smoking away as well. And
yeah,
there's like a film of smoke around the top of the band.
True.
And occasionally there'd be a committee meeting or an AGM or something. And now these seemed like great fun to me as a child, because everybody piled into the little room, which seemed like a kind of a Hogwartarian kind of study at the time, before the town hall had been done up. And everybody piled into here, where I think there was a pool table where people spread all the papers out. Everybody got a beer, and again, it was just full of smoke. And it almost seemed quite ethereal and mystical to me. And then they proceeded, after a 2-hour rehearsal, to be what I could only describe as a 4-hour argument. And I remember thinking quite early on, goodness me, people come for an argument with a hobby of playing some music. And like these crazy meetings seem to last forever, with everyone falling out with everybody else. And I couldn't quite grasp how we could all make music together and then seem to absolutely hate each other in the meetings. It was really bizarre. And I know you became involved in the committee at that time, and I wonder how you got involved in the committee, and describe your role in running the band. Yeah.
Well, I've talked about Ted Wheeling organising this British Legion band weekends down on the south coast of England, and I went to my first one, and it was just such an amazing buzz to be playing in this big ensemble. You had, you know, as you might imagine, you had like section and rehearsals through the first bit of the weekend. You had a concert from a top band to open the thing on a Friday night, usually a Royal Marines or Royal Air Force band. You know, in fact, one year they said, bring your instrument into the concert hall, and anybody who wants to play can play in the second half.
Really? Did you join in?
I was the only person who listened and took my instrument. So yes, I have played with the band of Her Majesty's Royal Marines.
Nice one, Bill. Great. I mean, isn't it amazing, actually? That shows a real sort of cultural difference, I think, between the band back then and the band now. If we'd said that to our members now, I would imagine every single member of the band would say, I'll have a go at playing with the Royal Marines, thanks. I'm up for that.
Yeah.
Whereas you were that's incredible. You were the only person to engage.
I was the only person when they said, right, second half now. Remember, we said bring your instruments. Who's brought their instruments? And I had the sax there. So anyway, coming back from this weekend of this wonderful, wonderful buzz, and we're on the bus traveling home, and all of these great characters who were part of the band, some of them sadly no longer with us, all moved on to other things in one way or another. We're all whinging and moaning about how bad the band was, how they were going to leave, how this wasn't right, that wasn't right. At that time, Phil and I were talking earlier today, Eddie did most of the fetching, carrying, humping and hauling himself. He wasn't necessarily the best of delegators. He was an action man. So I'm on this 5-hour bus journey. I'm buzzing with this weekend I've just had. I've found this band and how great it is, and suddenly it's all about to fall to pieces. So I sort of wrote a letter to Eddie saying, you know, I really don't want this to happen. You know, I want to be a part of this. I want to help. And they said, okay, Young'un, you can be. I was young, you know. You can be secretary. We need a secretary. You can be secretary. So that was how I got involved in the admin of it. And I did.
And how long were you on the committee for then, Bill?
I really lost track of it. It was more than 10 years, probably.
Yeah. So if it wasn't for you, really, I think the band could well have folded at that point, couldn't it? It could well have just, these 4-hour committee meetings where everybody shouted at each other could have consumed everything.
They carried on, but I have a high boredom tolerance. I think this on the bus, looking back, was probably all just mouthing off, and it would have carried on in the same way. Or I could claim my little moment of glory and say I saw the opportunity and did what needed to. We'll just leave that. We just leave that hanging. You know.
I think again there's a cultural shift now, isn't there? Because if the band needs help on the committee, who are incredibly forward thinking and very attractive, but if we say we've got a big event on, we need some help, you know, even if it's just providing tea, coffees, or helping show people which going to for a section or rehearsal, you know, members are very keen to help and support, and we do have that real sort of critical mass of people who want to get involved and to sort of help out. Whereas I get the impression that in the past, you know, Eddie was doing everything on his own, and then you managed to help a bit, and things started to grow from there, and people started to say, well, actually, if they're helping out, maybe I'll take some music stands then. And,
there was a bit of leading by example. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So places we played, I think two stick in my mind. There was one where somehow we got invited to play at this really posh wedding on the Wirral, in a big, enormous private garden on the Wirral, and Eddie organised that we were going to go on one of Hartley's buses, or what, you know, the little buses from Maghull. So we had this bus over to there, and a blazing hot sunny day, and we all decamped, and they said, oh, there's drinks over there for you boys. So, and it was mostly blokes in those days in the band. So, well, it would have seemed churlish to refuse, really. So we went and joined in. By the time it came to playing the concert, you know, we were all a little bit shaky.
Yeah, brilliant.
So that
could have been a jazz band.
There was certainly a lot of jazzy notes.
A few unintentional flat sevens.
And some sleeping in the bus on the way back. Another one I remember, and this has a relevance for you, Phil. I mean, MWO isn't your only ensemble. Round about the time that Swing Shift was just getting going, Eddie had like taken a back seat from conducting, and we were all kind of looking in your direction, but this dream of Swing Shift was just taking off. There was one concert at St Thomas's. It was the Flower Festival you're talking about that had a clash with Swing Shift's first gig. I'm pretty sure it was your first gig. So
right, yeah.
You absolutely had to be there. You know, it was your baby. You had to be there. But Eddie was on holiday, and the assumption had been that you would do this one at St Thomas's. Anyway, I got to conduct that. It's the only concert I've ever conducted.
That's great. You see, what a great opportunity I provided you with.
Precisely. I know my limitations. The other one I remember, we used to struggle to get numbers out to concerts in those days. Doreen would be trying to get the numbers up and checking, you know, like the sign-up sheet, except we'd be talking about, are we going to take 10 people or 18 or something to this this gig, and there was one Croxteth Hall Carol service, December the 14th, 2003, and I know that date because that was actually my 50th birthday, and we didn't have any saxophone players, and we didn't have any horn players. I'm not even sure if we didn't have a trombone player either. So we're short of all of those things. Alto sax, you can kind of jiggle about and manage most of those parts. So I went along, and I can't remember who was there. I think Doreen, you were there if you're with us, aren't you? And it was my birthday, so I actually went along with a bottle of whiskey in my inside pocket, and during the interval at the concert, the band all had a whiskey with me for those who were old enough to celebrate my 50th birthday.
Yeah, that, ladies and gentlemen, is commitment to the band. You see, that's.
I've still got my copy of Phantom of the Opera with all of the parts that weren't mine written in on it.
I thought you were going to say with the whiskey.
The whiskey's long gone.
As we were coming up to chat about this, I was trying to think about how I were conducting the band, and it was a bit unceremonious, really. I seem to remember Eddie sort of not being able to conduct the odd rehearsal of things, so nobody really knowing, well, should we cancel the rehearsal? What should we do? And I was about 15, 16, and I said, I can. And I remember being quite interested in conducting right from the very beginning of learning to play. I liked the idea of particularly the conductor being able to help the other musicians and get their vision of the music across to the other musicians, which Eddie had a certain style of doing, which is probably different to mine. But I've always really admired the idea of somebody being able to communicate with a large group of people and create something musical out of it, particularly if it's sort of in mind of their vision. So I started having a go, and I remember the first piece I conducted was Southampton from Titanic, which is Horner, isn't it? And we had a little arrangement of that, and I sort of, you know, if we're honest, the band probably played it on their own, and I followed along quite well, and I didn't get lost in the score, so that was a result. But then I suddenly, I remember quite clearly thinking, I know how I can make this better. If we bring out this bit a bit more, that's going to give us this rhythmic clarity that we want, and the melodies sit on top of that. So, you know, I plucked up the courage to say, let's try it like this and do this. Let's have this, and started breaking it down the way you'd rehearse your writers at home, and it all sort of came from there. And then I started doing the odd concert, and I've always quite enjoyed fronting bands, and I've not been too worried about talking to audiences and things. And as all that was starting, Legend sort of I'd cover for Eddie when he couldn't conduct, or sometimes he'd say to me, why don't you conduct this one and I'll have a play, you know, and he'd sit in the flute section and play and let me have a go at conducting. And him and a chap called Phil Cartledge, who was a clarinet player with the band at the time, he would occasionally conduct as well. And he would
anybody remember Phil, if you've seen Max, you know, with Peter Kay and Max and Paddy, you know, Max, he's Phil Cartledge.
It is.
That really thick Preston accent. You know,
it was, and a good clarinet player, very
super
good
clarinet player.
And I remember, I think one night we'd had a break in rehearsal, and we'd come back from the bar, and I'd had a Coke, obviously. So I was still, you know, only sort of 10 or 11. And Phil was sat on the stage at the town hall, and he was looking at the score because he was going to conduct and Eddie was going to have a play. So he's leafing through his score, thinking what he's doing. And he's looking at his watch, and he hit his watch with his baton like that. And I said, what are you doing? He says, I'm getting the tempo. Look, it says 120. So if we divide that up by 2 on your analog watch, that gives you that. And that was another kind of key learning concept or light bulb moment you want to talk about the idea of actually thinking about the tempos and things like that? And I remember that Bill was very, very encouraged me as well, and I looked up to him as a clarinet player greatly. I remember we did a concert somewhere, and somebody said to, I was sitting next to Phil playing clarinet then, and somebody said to him, "Well, you must be the best clarinet player in the band." And he goes, "No, this young lad is." And I thought, and I wasn't, but that was really touching to hear, and just so supportive and encouraging. And as I did a little bit more conducting, it was at that time that you were sort of getting an interest in conducting as well, really, wasn't it, Bill? And I think you'd been on a couple of conductors courses, and then you were very encouraging of me to go along and do the conducting course with Ted Wheeling and David Cole, and we went off together.
We're back to the same guy again, Ted Wheeling, because he persuaded the British Legion to run this free conducting course at their centre in Hampshire, and he brought in the director of music for the Royal Air Force Band, and the director of music for the Royal Marines, David Cole. If you go round the Royal Yacht at Leith, you'll see the programme for the concert leaving Hong Kong on the table there, and who conducted that concert? David Cole.
And I remember meeting David Cole at that course, and instantly I just thought, this is the guy I want to be like. I thought he's great. He had great rapport with the band, great rapport with the audience. He was musically spot on. He's a phenomenal tuba player and jazz sousaphone player as well. So we got talking about jazz and Dixieland music and things like that. And that he was a huge inspiration to me, and it was only a sort of 3-day course or something, wasn't it? But I was by far the youngest person.
Right, you were absolutely the youngest person there, but again, same kind of atmosphere of people sort of encouraging others to learn. But those two guys, particularly Ted and David, I mean, they, as I've said before, they clearly spotted something in you, because when we all had a go and learned by doing, etc. And then we come to the last bit of the weekend, and they picked out people to have another more serious go at it, and you got picked to do the Holst.
That's right. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah,
with the two different times. The two different time signatures going in it.
That's right. Yeah, Fantasia on the Dogs, where you conduct it in one and you've got 3/4 against 6/8. That's right. Yeah.
I was so impressed.
Yes, I'd forgotten about that actually, Bill. But I remember coming home from that weekend, and that was it. I was going to be a bandmaster in the army then. That's it. I was going to join the army and be a bandmaster. And I remember for about a week of listening to nothing but military marches and polishing and things like that. I thought, that's it. This is the career for me. However, on closer inspection, I discovered you had to run around and do assault courses and, be relatively fit. So I changed my career plans to become a jazz musician instead, rather quickly. But at that time, I thought, gosh, yeah, this is absolutely what I fancy doing. Yeah,
it was very inspiring. Yeah,
it really was, and I quite enjoyed the pomp and circumstance around the military kind of feel of things as well. And we can't talk about the past of the band without mentioning the uniform changes.
I thought that's where you were going with the pomp and circumstance. Yeah, that was another spin-off from these weekends, that this ragtag of a band that had a sort of a uniform, which was sort of a grey jacket, and some people had British Legion ties, and some people had some pink and grey stripy ties.
That's right, which had been blagged from a car place.
MG car company, MG Rover as it became.
Yeah.
But there was no, and then we went to these weekends, and some of the people who had a bit to say about how the band should be, etc. And they said, "Oh, we should be like that. Yeah, we should have a uniform." And there was it's easy to look back on it negatively now. There was a definite, groundswell in that direction of wanting to make us look better as well as play better, and uniform was seen as a way, and we worked really hard raising loads of money, and it was a unanimous decision to go for it, and we spent a load of money on one jacket each for the 24 players or something we had then. Yours was the littlest, Phil. I can remember that. This was one of the jobs.
I'm afraid.
I had to work out which of these jackets would fit which person if it was different people playing at the concerts. And we got these, and week one, there was 2 people who'd been around and involved in the decision and actually said, no, actually, I'm not going to wear that. I spent my life in the army wearing uniform. I don't want a uniform. And to this day, I don't know why I didn't speak up a month before, but anyway.
I remember quite a buzz of excitement at rehearsals when the guy from the jacket company came down and we all got measured up, and it was all very exciting.
We got a bit carried away along by it, yeah.
Yeah, and I think there was quite a buzz about it. But then when they came, they appeared to be tailor-made, not to fit anybody.
Yeah. They were individually tailor-made, and of course, that's great business, because if they don't fit anybody else, you've got to buy another one.
That's right.
We had this tension for several years over them, lots of effort trying to get the right number of jackets, trying to persuade people to wear them. We were trying to get your brother Andy to come back and play for us in those days. He was a founder member, but had got on with his life. We were trying to get him to come back, and the one thing Andy wouldn't do was wear one of these pesky jackets, and that was a source of contention in the committee, and that rumbled on for a few years. And was the bane of my existence, really. These things, if they weren't in people's wardrobes, they lived in my house. I had to turn up with them at concerts and say, well, let's fit you, try it. Go on, try it. You look a bit the same size as Phil. Try that one.
And the problem is all this fuss with the uniform, it then takes away from musical decisions. Correct. Because then if you need more players, or you need a certain, if you've not got any second clarinet players and you need to draft some in, have we got jackets for them? No. Yeah. So then it impacts on the music.
Absolutely bang on there. We started to be successful, and we started to grow in numbers, and we started to grow in young people numbers. And the thing young people do is they grow.
Yeah,
and they grow bigger. Right.
So
you're not just buying one jacket, you're buying one every time they grow. And eventually I reached the points of saying, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm spending all of my time trying to squeeze people into jackets. And worse than that, I can see the band is spending all of its time playing concerts to raise money to buy jackets at £300 a pop.
Yeah, they would.
I remember it was an AGM that I said this, and I actually went in a black bought from Primark suit for £10, and I said, this here that I'm wearing cost £10, and to my mind, that's good enough for us. That's the kind of thing we should have, not these £300 jackets.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm a huge believer that an audience listens with their eyes as well as their ears, and there's a certain amount of theatrics to any performance. You've got to have that stagecraft, and you've got to look as good as you sound. But those jackets became prohibitively expensive, and and
a distraction.
It's much better to go with the smart all black, which I know was a difficult decision at the time, and a lot of people didn't agree with that.
Yeah.
But as I took over the conducting,
some people left because of it.
Yeah, that's right. But it had to happen to allow the band to grow and succeed. And actually, since doing the sort of big concert at the film things, we've been better equipped with money, and also we raised a lot of money for stands and pads, and we look very, very professional. In actual fact, with having a shortage of those red jackets and the odd person in all black or the odd dep in all black, you know, or the I'm still waiting for a jacket, I've not got one yet kind of scenario, we never really looked as smart as we did now, although that was done with the best intentions. But it is interesting to see, we look at the old photographs and you see the changes in the size of the band, and you see the changes in the style of what we're wearing. You know, some of those old pictures look very 1970s, people's with kind of grey flares on and a blue blazer and what have you, through to the military kind of jacket. They were military, red military mess jackets, weren't they, with old braiding and things.
That was the basic style,
and then into sort of our smart all black, which I think works better, and you can sort of progress, you can see the progression of the band through the style and through the image we portray of ourselves, as well as the way the band is run and the way that the music has changed as well to suit the membership that we've got now and engage more people in it. So before we finish tonight, I was just going to have a little chat with you, Bill, about your view from the saxophone section and how playing in the band has evolved from those first few rehearsals that Pete brought you down to and sitting next to Brian, and how you felt the change actually from within the band, not so much your role helping run the band or sort of being involved in all that sort of thing, but as a musician who's been with the band for so long, how have you seen that develop, and how has it developed your own playing as a saxophone player yourself?
One of the things is that there's more people studying for and taking exams than there were when I joined, and that's become, I mean, that's partly because we got more young people, but it's not just young people taking exams. There's people my age taking exams. I mean, my last exam, I'm 67. My last exam was age 63 or something. You're never too old to stop developing like that. And I was saying to Phil earlier today, somebody challenged me about something, about, continuing to have lessons, continuing to try and learn from those around you and develop, because you're never going to be perfect. There's always going to be something you can do a little better. And the thing I notice is when we get something out that we've played before, how we've moved on, and we as an ensemble have got better at playing a thing. And I may have played it before, and maybe somebody next to me who hasn't played it before, and I know where some of the like little wrinkles and pitfalls are, and then this person next to me sort of plays this piece of sight reading and just blowed my mind, and that encourages me to try and do better. And we are doing more stretching music. I've got a challenge for you, actually. The Malcolm Arnold's Padstow Lifeboat, our chairman once organised a lifeboat evening in Rain Hill, just around the corner from Wiston Hospital, and this had to have Malcolm Arnold's Padstow Lifeboat in, and gosh, we struggled to play that.
I would imagine that's still in the library that's at the town hall, actually.
Probably
and I just wonder if the only reason you want to play that again is so you can do the hooter of the lifeboat on your yeah, I tend to remember it's actually.
I think it's a B flat on the alto or something like that. Totally out of tune. No, I think a wider range of music, more challenging music. It's very rare that we get something out and as we might have done in the early days, say, oh no, that's terrible, we're never going to play that, put it away. Don't see that happening. We stick at things and develop together through them. I don't know how we're going to go forward in COVID when we can't even meet together to play music, even sectionally, we'd struggle.
Yeah, there's still a lot of research, and there's a lot of research, and there's a great deal of debate still around, particularly amateur music making in groups. So that is still a subject of great research and debate. We'll have to see what happens. There is a lot of people looking into it and seeing how we can make that safe, whether that is outside or smaller groups, and behind the scenes our committee are looking into it as well. So I'm sure things will be able to return, and we will be able to make music together again in the future. And I think the future looks quite bright, really. It's interesting the way you talk about the whole band moving forward together and progressing. You know, as we all practice, we all strive to improve. But as a band of nearly 100 members, we've got people improving at different rates, you know, and as you know, as a musician yourself, you can spend a long time practicing to reach a point where you plateau, and you stay at that level for a while. Then you do a load of practice and you go dink, and you suddenly get that little bit better. And the better you are, the longer that plateau is, and the harder you have to work to nudge yourself up to the next level. So we're all moving at different levels, but the whole band is progressing as an ensemble steadily forward. And I think that is partly because of the way we inspire each other. We don't want to let our colleagues in the band down. We all work as hard as we possibly can, and nobody takes their responsibilities in rehearsals or concerts lightly. Everybody wants to do the best they can possibly do. And I'm just as inspired by the musicians in the band as anybody, and I want to do the best job I possibly can for rehearsing the band and for conducting the ensemble and for fronting the concerts, you know, and that's what inspires me to keep going. And I think really our band inspires everybody else and everybody in it. And we are better together and as a whole working together towards a shared goal. And I think that really is, you know, if you cut MWO in half, that's what's running through all of us, isn't it? It's that making music together with a real sense of community and enjoyment. And I think that's a really nice sentiment to leave tonight's conversation on, Bill. It's lovely. A huge thanks to you for joining us, and it's been really interesting talking to you.
Great fun to reminisce. I mean, 26 years with MWO has been really, really important, really formative, given me a skill and enjoyment, you know, wouldn't have believed possible. Amazing.
Yeah, and we'll be back to it soon and doing the same thing again, and for many, many years to come. Thanks to everybody who's tuned in tonight. Thanks to Chris Horswood for all the technology and all the wizardry behind the scenes. And if you're watching this in the future, either on the Facebook page or on YouTube, I hope you've enjoyed it, and be sure, if you're not aware of Maghull Wind Orchestra, to have a look out for us on Facebook and online. But for tonight and until our fortnight's time, stay safe, and we'll see you all again very soon. Good night.